The moment Sarah walked into the ballroom, she felt every eye turn toward her, or at least that's what her anxiety-riddled mind screamed. She clutched her purse tighter. The weight of the invitation that had arrived 3 weeks, ego suddenly feeling like a brick in her chest. Her college roommate's wedding, the one she'd promised to attend, the one where everyone else would arrive as part of a couple wrapped in the comfort of another person's arm, while she came alone with her 7-year-old son's words still echoing in her ears. "Mommy, you look so pretty. I wish I could be there to hold your hand." Thomas had fallen asleep before she left, his small hand still clutching the stuffed bear she'd bought him last week with money she probably should have saved. The babysitter had reassured her everything would be fine, but nothing ever felt fine anymore. Not since the divorce. Not since becoming invisible in the way that only a single mother in her mid-30s could understand. Invisible to men who didn't want the complications. Visible only as broken to those who saw her failures before they saw her strength. She'd bought the dress 6 months ago before the separation, when she still believed in occasions that mattered. It was navy blue, understated, the kind of dress that whispered elegance rather than screamed it. But wearing it now felt like wearing a lie. She smoothed it down as she found her table, careful not to make eye contact with the other guests. At least she'd been seated with some of her college friends, though they'd all arrived with partners, a blur of matching suits and perfectly manicured hands intertwined. The ceremony had been beautiful in that way weddings are supposed to be, and Sarah had cried during the vows, though not for the reasons everyone probably assumed. She'd cried because she remembered believing in forever once. She'd cried because she wondered if Thomas would grow up thinking love was a temporary thing, something that could simply vanish one day. She'd cried because she was tired of feeling like a supporting character in everyone else's story. Dinner was served. Salmon for the refined palate, asparagus for the vegetables, something with saffron rice that probably cost more than Sarah spent on groceries in a week. She pushed the food around her plate, making conversation when required, smiling at the right moments, doing all the performance art that single people had become so practiced at, proving they were okay, that being alone was a choice, not a consolation prize. That's when she noticed him. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with silver threading through, dark hair and a quality of presence that made him seem separate. From the carefully constructed perfection around him, he wore his tailored suit the way some people wear comfort clothes, like it was part of him, not armor. But what struck her most was the way he sat at the adjacent table, alone, his wedding ring visible even from a distance, and the sadness in his eyes as he watched the newlyweds. Their eyes met for just a moment, and in that brief intersection, something passed between them, a recognition of shared solitude, perhaps, or simply the understanding that comes when two people see each other truly. When the dancing began, Sarah excused herself to the powder room. She needed a moment away from the noise, from the couples spinning across the dance floor like extras in a romance film that didn't include her. She was reapplying her lipstick, preparing her mask for the second act of the evening, when he appeared in the mirror behind her. Not in a threatening way, he kept a respectful distance, but with a quiet purposefulness that made her turn around. "I'm David Chen," he said, and his voice was warm, like amber light. "I noticed you sitting alone, and I know how that feels. My wife passed away 14 months ago. Tonight, watching everyone celebrate, it got to me. And then I saw you, and I saw that same ache." He paused, studying her face with genuine compassion. "I'm not asking for anything real. I'm just wondering, would you let me pretend to be your husband for the evening? Just so we're both a little less alone?" Sarah's first instinct was to say no. People didn't do things like this. Strangers didn't offer kindness this direct, this raw. But then she thought of Thomas, of how she'd told him she was going to have fun tonight, and of how the weight of that lie had pressed against her all evening. She thought of how exhausting it was to perform wholeness when you felt so fractured. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'd like that." What followed was the most unexpected evening of Sarah's adult life. David didn't try to be something he wasn't. He didn't make jokes or try to convince her that everything was fine. Instead, they sat together at the reception, and he asked her real questions. How many kids? What made her smile these days? What did she dream about when she let herself dream? Sarah found herself talking in a way she hadn't in months. Honestly, openly, without the protective layers she usually wrapped around herself. When they danced, a slow song, unchained melody, of all things. He held her the way a gentleman holds a woman he respects. Not too close, not too distant. "Your son is lucky," he said softly. "He has a mother who shows up for him and for herself." Later, during a break in the music, he showed her a photograph on his phone. A woman with David's eyes and an impossibly bright smile. 23 years, he said. "We didn't get forever, but we got enough to know what it meant." He looked at Sarah. "You will too. Not necessarily with someone else, though maybe. But you'll build a life with your son that's full and real and beautiful. That's its own kind of forever." Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not healing. Not yet, but the possibility of it. The way a frozen river might sense the coming spring. The evening ended as all evenings do. David walked her to her car, and she offered him her hand to shake, grateful for the grace of his company. He pressed it gently between both of his instead. "Thank you for letting me sit beside you," he said, "and for reminding me that kindness is the last language we never lose, even when we think we've forgotten how to speak." She drove home in silence, thinking. When she paid the babysitter and climbed the stairs to check on Thomas, she found him still clutching his bear. She bent down and kissed his forehead. And instead of the usual ache, she felt something different. A small, fragile sense of possibility. A reminder that she didn't have to have it all figured out. She just had to keep showing up for herself, for her son, for the moments when a stranger's kindness could remind her that the world still contained goodness. The next morning, she found a handwritten note in her mailbox. David's handwriting was elegant, careful. "You are not invisible," it read, "and you never were." Sarah kept that note in her dresser drawer, pulling it out on hard days. She never saw David again, but she thought of him often, the way he taught her that. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is the simple acknowledgement that we see them, truly see them in all their complicated humanity. Months later, when a friend set her up on a real date, she said yes, not because she was desperate or lonely, but because she'd learned that opening herself to possibility was a form of courage. She didn't know where that path would lead, but she walked it differently now, not as someone looking to be saved, but as someone who'd already proven she was strong enough to save herself. And she made sure to tell Thomas about kindness, real kindness, the kind that asks nothing in return and gives everything. She told him about the stranger at the wedding who reminded her that sometimes the smallest gestures contain the greatest power, that you don't have to know someone for their compassion to change your life, that sometimes one night of being truly seen is enough to help you see yourself again. In the end, that was what mattered most.